over time, you moved out of the caravan park. You got a boyfriend, and then you found yourself pregnant.
That's right.
And how old?
17.
17, pregnant.
Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely. And at that point I was working for a sales firm and loving my job. So it did come as I tell my daughters, a wonderful surprise. It was a wonderful surprise. But to a 17-year-old, back then and after what I'd been through, I noticed too, I was very terrified in my body. I felt I have a being on board that I can't protect myself. It was an inbuilt thing. I think even though I then had a job, I had a home, there was this feeling inside me still that was, if you need to get away fast or something happens, you can't run, you can't climb trees being pregnant, you can't do this. So there was a great learning time for me through that period as well of being vulnerable, and allowing myself sort of to be cared for by my boyfriend at the time, and, to really go through this whole new experience so very young.
Yeah,
again.
Very young. I mean, what you had dealt with by the time you were 17 is extraordinary. You had another child 2 years later.
Yes.
But by 22, you were divorced with 2 young children.
2, yes.
Through the years raising your children as a single mum, I mean, obviously you have built up extraordinarily strong skills at being resourceful and tenacious and resilient and all the rest of it. What was the mindset that really allowed you then to raise those children while ultimately you pursued a pretty successful career?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Balance was very much there. And I think that the mindset in that was I knew absolutely what didn't work raising children.
Yeah.
I really remembered so clearly as a child what I wanted, what was missing, and what meant so much to me that it felt like really ready access to that. I knew I knew how to parent them. I knew they needed affection, love, to know that they were okay and that they were good little people, and that I knew they would always have a home, and I knew that I would always be there for them. So there was a lot of love went on in that family. We used to say this at Christmases together. It's not the size of the family; it's the size of the love, and we had an enormous amount of love that was going on.
It's funny. I think we often, depending on how we've been parented, we either say, I'm going to do it just like my mum and dad, or I am so not doing it like my parents did it. And obviously you had a lot of, I am not doing it the way they did it.
That's right. I think that's true. People go on to either repeat it or make a break in it. And that was the thing. I thought, wow, these children are going to grow up and just know how amazing they are and what they're capable of. And it was a great blessing for me too, because then I did have this family, this sense of unity and this love that was going on, and it was really a great gift. But it wasn't, of course, without its challenges as well, because I was divorced and on my own with the two, and as you say, working and building a career. And it was extremely important to me for that to still go ahead. And ultimately, I do believe too, that was a great example for the children. It was about balance. I needed time with them, and they needed. And
you also then went back to study as well.
Yes, several times.
Yeah, quite a few
yes,
times.
I went on. Yes, to 3 times back to university, and that was a really a big thing in itself. And that's when I really realized, again, circumstances don't define me. What has happened to me is not who I am. It's what happened to me. It's an event.
A powerful, honestly, it's so true. What happens to us is not who we are. It doesn't define us.
Absolutely.
But too often, people let it define them.
It's true. It becomes enmeshed, and you can no longer work out where do you begin and where do the circumstances begin. And that's, as it's just a recipe for disaster and a recipe for weakening ourselves. It's a really a strong thing to stand out and say, well, this is what's happened, but this is who I am and this is what I'm going to do about it. It puts us back in that driver's seat. That in itself just gives us such a power. And that was the same with going to university. I felt, I know I can do these things. I know I can study and get these grades. And so I went and sat the test that, you need to do that. And you test across the state with 10,000 others that sit it, and you need to be able to come up, equal. And I was just so thrilled. But I think that an important thing for me was that I already knew that I would do it with or without that piece of paper. I was going to get there. But I did. I went on and did do 3 degrees over time, and right now this year I'm completing my doctorate.
Yeah, so completing your doctorate. Yes. Hats off to you. That's fantastic. It's such a powerful testament that we can always rise above our circumstances. Yes. And what you've risen above. You absolutely have never been a victim. No. You've been victorious over whatever has been thrown at you. I wanted to ask you also about your experience of loss. You've experienced a lot of loss in your life.
Yeah.
I know you said one year you lost 11 friends.
Yeah.
Another year you lost your dad and your partner and who else?
Yes, and a niece and nephew as well, and it was a phenomenal amount of both those times. It was a really big, a lot of losses altogether. And again later, which maybe what you're referring to is when, a different kind of loss was when I was finally back in touch with my mother, and then I lost her through a series of strokes that happened to her very quickly. And at the same time, my house was burgled, and my manuscript, which was just 2 months off being sent, was stolen with along with the computers. And
that was before iCloud.
Yes, that's right. Dropbox, all the things.
Yeah, all those things that would give you that. So, what have you learned? I mean, whether it's been losing people you've loved, or I know you lived in the US for a while and you left a community there, losing your mum years later to strokes. I mean, before she actually died, you weren't able to really communicate with her. What have you learned about dealing with loss and how people can come out through the other side of the most difficult loss, still whole and happy?
Yes. I think loss is such an important one, because loss is exactly that. We do lose pieces of ourselves in there. I mean, it's such a big thing we come up against, especially when we lose people we love. And things we've put a lot of time into too, like a work, like a book or whatever it is, if you've, burgled, these sorts of things, or any sense of loss, home, again, which of course I have had that, and, things with employment, where we just are struck with so much loss, and it can happen all at once. It always comes back to the same thing for me eventually. We fall down. We do. It's human nature, and I think sometimes we're just meant to too. We fall down because we're trying to carry too much when we're hit with things like that. And then we find ground again. It's down there that we find our feet and we find our ground, and we find the strength to say, and this is what got me through, and I say this in the book, it's the 7 words that saved my life and turn it around time and time again, is I am stronger than what I face. It straight away puts a sense of courage back where it is. It's like, and it actually validates what you're facing. It's like, this is enormous, but I'm stronger, and this is, it's step by step. It's that validating. It's like, well, I'm at rock bottom, but what do I build from here? If my first step is to just make sure I'm going to start eating better again today, I'm going to take care of myself. We tend to not eat when there's a loss, or maybe we eat too much, or there's this sort of thing. And there's just, okay, that's what I'm doing first, but I'm building back. I'm building back, and I'm starting with the one thing I always have, which is me. And it's the only thing I ultimately always have. The one person that will be there from the first breath and there every millisecond of everything we go through is ourselves. That's the one person we do have. So
it's the ultimate source of security. I mean, I guess some people might talk about faith, their faith in God is a source of security, but faith in ourselves, faith in that I'm always here to back myself.
Yes.
And for you, like, obviously having to be absolutely, it was just all on you at 14, but throughout life, no matter what you take away from me. Think about Viktor Frankl, actually, in his powerful story in the concentration camps in Nazi Germany. You can take everything away from me, but you cannot take me away from me. And my ability to choose in any moment how I will respond, what I will do, and even in the most debilitating loss, well, I will feed myself well today. Just what is it that I can do to overcome whatever it is that we face. And I think those 7 words, they're powerful, aren't they? I am bigger than anything I face.
Yes, that's right. It puts you straight back there.
You're in the driver's seat.
Yes, and and you're invested in you. It straight away says there is someone here for me. It's me. I'm going to be here. I'm not going to walk away. Yeah. And I'm really glad that you said that too, about, that one thing we have is our, choice, that how we respond. And of course, at first there's reaction, which happens, and it's natural human emotion, but that is our choices then, that it comes back to us. Viktor Frankl, he and Nazim Hikmet, who was a poet that lived most of his adult life in jail, in prison for freedom of speech, just for writing things for the people. And he speaks about that too. And these are the people I admire, like Nelson Mandela, again, people who don't let the walls around them or the no home around them in my circumstance, or people that have survived just horrendous things like Viktor Frankl, it's they didn't get to them, they were hurt, they survived tremendous horrendous loss, whole families, everything that went on for them, loss of freedom, like again Nazim Hikmet was imprisoned, and he wrote in prison to others who may end up in prison. That's what he wrote, and he said, protect the one jewel that you can, and that is the one beating in the center of your chest. Protect that. And again with Nelson Mandela, if he left his sense of self behind, then he would have been in prison for life. So
well, and I think whether it's Mandela or Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, which to anyone who hasn't read that book, I always say you must read that book. Absolutely. It's an absolute must-read book, as harrowing a read as it is. But I think about Frankl wrote, we have to have meaning beyond ourselves, and those who had nothing to live for were the ones who gave up. They just died because what they had to deal with. For you, in what you've dealt with and what you do now, I mean, today you're an author, you're a speaker, you work and you do transformational programs with people around the world. Obviously you get an enormous sense of reward from that. Yes. What is it that gives you a sense of meaning and purpose?
Wow. Well, there are a number of things, but making a difference really does make all the difference, I think. And it's interesting because it was funny when I was very small. I remembered I was a bit of a goofball, even amongst all that funny stuff that goes on. And I really do believe, again, that humor is such a strength. And it also goes along with self-love, it's that humor there to be able to laugh at ourselves and at funny things that we do sometimes. But that sense of making a difference, I would sometimes manage to make my parents laugh. They would just suddenly laugh at something, and I would notice just this shift in, just even if it was for a few moments, that it would last. And I knew right away, I thought, that's a powerful thing. You can make a difference. And
even if just to make somebody
laugh, yes, and lift it for a few moments. This dark cloud that was going on just a few moments ago, there was that. And the same with sometimes, again in my family, I felt when I look back, it was being a little mediator. I wanted to make sure everyone was okay, and of course that has limits because you don't want to go into that rescue mode where it's unhealthy. But when it's a healthy thing and you realize that just a hand on someone else's hand, or just a squeeze of a shoulder, or just a smile, if that's all you have for someone, you can see it change someone's whole life when they're walking on the street. If you actually even look in their eyes and really see them, it's in that moment. And that is
to acknowledge the humanity, the other person that you have just walked past.
Absolutely. And I often see it too in supermarkets of all places. People just get lost behind that register, and when you actually walk up sometimes and you really say hello and you look at them, you can just see that they remember that they're dimensional. It's funny, it's just this light comes back on, I'm not just blurred in with everything else that's going on in life. And I think it's so wonderful when we feel that from someone, that it's just such a wonderful gift to be able to give to somebody.
To me, to me the core of that is just acknowledging someone.
Yes.
I see you.
That's right, and it can change their whole life.
Yeah.
That might have been that one day that just changed everything for them.
Yeah.
And it did for me as a child. I know the power of that. Being on the street, I felt very invisible, and I was also trying to be invisible. But things that had happened to me earlier in my life, we had at one stage some really lovely neighbours that we lived next to for a very short period of time because we had to move again. But they were very kind to my siblings and I, and they would just sometimes lean down and say to me, "You're such a good girl," or "You're so clever," and those sorts of things. I would think, they can see me. I actually did feel like I was sort of vaporous as a child because so much was going on and happening so fast that you just weren't even noticed. And I knew what sense of self that gave to me. So I feel that makes such a difference in the world and gives me meaning in return. We get so much from it. We're so blessed in return.
Well, it's the ultimate in getting a sense of meaning is what we give out, not what we get.
Yes, absolutely.
And you don't have to be Mandela and you don't have to be Bill Gates to be able to give. And just the smile can make, I couldn't agree with you more. So as you look forward into life from now, how old are your kids now?
Oh, they're into their 20s.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. But still so young.
You look far too young to have children in your 20s.
Thank you. Yes, and doing so well in their own right. They're both fantastic.
They grew up knowing they were very loved and they would always have a home.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you look forward now, do you still have moments where you feel afraid or vulnerable?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
How do you work through that emotion of vulnerability or fear as it comes up for you today?
It's such a good question,
Thank you.
Welcome, Margie. I just feel that it's the same thing that I was doing right from very, very little, and then on the street. But it just happens to turn around, gets faster and faster, and it's there for all of us. When these things happen, it's just a sense of case of remembering again that what builds you is what you need to gravitate to, and the moment you start doing it, you'll instantly shift and feel better, and then you watch more of it, or you listen to more, you read more of it, or you tell yourself more of it. It gets bigger and bigger, and you just start to move away so much quicker from what it is that's debilitating, or what makes you feel like you maybe can't do it, or you're feeling scared or vulnerable. And at the same time, I think I gravitate to happiness. I just do, and it's not a false happiness. It's it's a genuine happiness. No matter what's going on, you can think of something that makes you feel good, even if it is your children, or even if it is a memory from the past, something that made you feel good. You can start there. And if you can't even find that within yourself, and I know I mentioned this in my book at one point after losing my partner, and I was completely devastated. It was moving, just knowing the math again. Feeling good helps. I have to make myself read something that will, shift this. And it did, and I just went and picked up a book and started reading. And it was very mechanical at first, but bit by bit, I came back to a sense of strength again and moved out of that place of feeling afraid. But one other thing that I really believe is so powerful too, and I really believe that this is as big as, if not more important, but more palatable than forgiveness. For me, it's acceptance. And I think when you accept a thing, you don't have to like it. And that's the big difference. You don't have to like it, but you accept it. It gives you back your power. I had to accept that my partner had died. It was a very difficult thing, and it took me a year. But that was what I found in that book that I read, was that, until you accept something, you can't move forward. So we beat our heads against the thing. I don't like it, and it's not fair, and it shouldn't have happened.
We fight with reality.
We do.
Yeah, like it can't. This can't be. It's not right. It can't be, and it
absolutely
it is.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that allows you to say, yes, it's unfair, and yes, it is tragic.
It hurts.
Yeah, it's all of these things, but it has happened.
Yeah.
And in that moment, there's a sort of a giving away from all that, the pushing against and the force.
Yeah.
So in that acceptance, you also get that strength, and then you can start to move forward.
Yeah, I think absolutely accepting. But that phrase you used earlier, gravitate to whatever builds you up.
Yes.
And whether when you were on the streets at 14, you knew that certain thoughts, getting stuck in certain things, would weaken you physically. They weaken you, but as well as obviously mentally and emotionally. And I think for all of us, what is it that fills us up? What is it that builds us? And too often we get stuck in this going like on a treadmill. Shouldn't be this way, and I don't want it to be like this, and we focus so much on what we can't do and what's wrong and what's not right, and versus what is it that fills you up, and focus on what we focus on expands in our lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's always a small thing you can find. There's always
something.
You just have to look for it,
Yeah.
right? There is. We always do. There is something, even if it's on that treadmill and it's like, I can walk. I have legs that can carry me. We start to think about it again when you really think about it. It's so funny. Just the other day, and this is why I'm so grateful for the gratitude. I just was aware again of how fortunate we are. I was just filling up my water bottle, and from the filtered water, and I was thinking, again, how amazing a gift that is, that it is. And it's funny how good it makes you feel. That's the thing. It's not about being, mind your manners and you should be grateful. It's actually a beautiful feeling. It feels good. I was just feeling it. And when I noticed, I thought, wow, I am so glad that I'm so thirsty right now, and I can just feel this. And it's not only just water, it's actually filtered water. I'm really, really blessed. And it just felt really good. It was just a takeaway moment. But again, even if it's a small thing, there's always something. Something.
That gratitude is such a powerful emotion. It's such a contagious one too.
Yes.
When just sitting here with you, I'm like, damn it, I'm more grateful for my water now too. Just
Yes, it's contagious.
And I think it is contagious, and it really shifts our focus from what we don't have to what we do have. And I mean, obviously, living in Australia or living in the US, anywhere in the developed world, we have so much to be grateful for.
Yeah, we do.
And yet too often we aren't. We can complain about the government and what we don't have and everything else, and there's so much to be grateful for. And I think it's almost like we have to be intentional about really cultivating that as a habit.
Yeah.
As something that we focus on, because, you know, the way we think becomes habitual, and we get these default patterns. It's like we're always complaining or criticizing or whatever it is, versus just being constantly in thanksgiving, you know.
Yes.
You know?
Absolutely. And again, doing that repetitively, it gets easier. It's like anything, you know, it's because you can be grateful for a day when it's not really, you know, when it's a bit more foreign to you, or we can, you know, feel grateful, and then we fall off the next day and we're yelling at someone in the car or wherever we are. But it's just habit. Yeah. You know, they say it takes 3 months, right, to make a habit. It's just like going to the gym. If you can go for 3 months, it becomes easier and easier. It's the same with
maybe that's where I've always gone wrong, because I was always doing the 21-day rule. Oh, yes. Yeah, and it's 3 months. So I was 21 days versus 90. There was probably 70 days there where I stopped short. Just a tad. So that feeling of a lot of people, I talk a lot about vulnerability, and feeling vulnerable and being okay with feeling vulnerable.
Yes.
Because it's in that place of vulnerability that we can discover more about ourselves, that we can grow, that we have to be in that place if we want to achieve things that we haven't achieved before. For you, you know, obviously in your career and now the work you do today, you know, where do you see people afraid of being vulnerable, and how do you see that holding people back?
I do see a lot of that too, you know. It is such a common thread with us all. And again, people get caught so much in the past and let that define what will happen to them up ahead based on what's happened before. So they believe that, you know, if I put up this wall, you know, it'll keep me safe. And then the opposite, if I take it down, you know, that makes me vulnerable and that's bad. But if I keep this up, I'm safe, you know. And or they just, you know, again, of course, that great fear that if I trust again, I'll end up sad again. If I do this again, but you know, this is what I really do stress to people is it's not love and it's not life that let us down. It's the events that happen within them. And you know, I mean, love's a great feeling and life is an amazing thing. And it's coming back to, if you know, again, this is math. If we shut ourselves off and we reduce ourselves because of fear, we're going to pretty much open ourselves to have worse things happen, because you know, we've contained ourselves to this little area. We're on board with someone who's feeling very negative. That's our company, it's ourself, who's telling us, you know, a lot of negative things. And if that's who we're spending time with, then it's just going to perpetuate.
Yeah.
It's, you know, like we're not just what we eat, of course we are who we, you know, associate with. And if the person you have on board is being very negative and afraid, it's just going to build and build and build. And so again, that sense of acceptance, I find, helps people move through a lot of that fear. Is, you know, these things happen to you or have happened in your life. People didn't show up, or maybe they did, and then they left, or all these sorts of things have happened to you. But if you know that the one person you have on board is going to be there for you, and you actually like that person, that's going to be a big change. Your life is actually going to change in phenomenal ways. I always say, you know, we wake up and come home to the same person every day, and that's ourselves. And it better be someone you like.
So to somebody watching right now who's like, okay, well, I'm not sure I like that person very much. What do you do?
Well, I say this person's 3D standing in front of you right now, and they listen to every single thing you say and they hear it. Straight away, that usually brings out some sense of compassion. I know it does to me right away. You know, we can all still do it. I mean, you know, even just getting ready in the morning. But you imagine saying to someone, if you said, oh my God, you look hideous today, or, you know, like someone you really cared about, or if it was a child, someone vulnerable, picture someone vulnerable that you care about or in front of you, and saying those things, how it would have an effect. If you realize, this is, you know, what I get people to realize, there's a real live person on board listening to it, and the thing is, they believe every word you say.
Yeah, that's it.
So you start to have a bit of compassion for that person, and you know, why do they deserve these sorts of things coming from you? They're old records that you've heard and you're just repeating through habit from someone else in your life somewhere, or maybe circumstance. But today's the day you take that back. You're the driver of this ship, and what are you going to do today?
And I think that's where it is about being very intentional. First, tuning into ourselves. Like, what radio station are you tuned into?
Yes.
Because sometimes we're tuned into, you know, like 101 negative FM.
Absolutely.
And it sucks us. And, you know, we're critical, and we're critical of ourselves, and we're critical of others, and we're negative, and we're anxious. And versus going, you know, tune into, you know, 89.9 Light FM, whatever, and that lifts you, you know. And I think we all can find ourselves doing the negative self-talk.
Absolutely.
I know I can. And that's where reading things that lift me up, being with people who lift me up,
Yes.
listening to music that lifts me up, you know, just
Absolutely.
surrounding ourselves and creating an environment that's filled with the positive messages that build us, that lift us, that really counteract that sometimes that little voice.
Yes.
And then when we find ourselves in that self-critical mode, okay, I hear you, shut up. You know what, I'm going to celebrate. Aren't I lucky? Practice the gratitude.
Absolutely.
Focus on what it is we want to do. Focus on what we love. Focus on what moves us forward and really inspires us. I think that word inspire comes to breathe life into. What gives us a sense of life, and
Absolutely.
take action, because
Yes.
when you get out there and take that action, it's what reinforces that, yes, life is good.
That's right. Life is good.
Despite
Yes.
everything it can chuck at us, life is good.
That's right. No matter what happens within it, life is good. That's
Yeah.
the thing.
Life
And the
is
moment
good.
we take that action, everything shifts.
Yeah.
It's just the energy, it shifts.
Yeah. Well, from the time you were 14, when your world shifted on its axis, you have really provided such an inspirational role model for how much we can ultimately rise above our circumstances, no matter how dire they are, and all the excuses and justifications that we can often have for playing small, thinking small, and being miserable, that it doesn't have to be that way.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, Lynika, I'm going to make sure I've got your pronunciation right. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. You inspire me, and you're beautiful too, by the way.
Thanks,
You're just
Margie.
beautiful.
Thank you.
And I'm really hoping those who've watched our conversation today will help them find a bit more courage within themselves to define themselves and rise above whatever they face, and know that, you know what, we're all bigger than whatever we face.
Thanks, Margie. I hope so too. Everyone has a story, and this world needs theirs and their light. So
Yeah.
I'm it was really my pleasure to share this with you. Thank you.
Pleasure.